Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today's session, Why DeFi Now? Integrating on-chain liquidity into the institutional trading stack. My name is Anton Deshchenko. I'm a senior product manager at Talos, and I'm very happy to be joined by Turchin, head of business development and partnerships at Uniswap Labs. Drew, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Anton. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody for joining. I'm looking forward to diving in.
And dive in with Shell. So Talos has been around for close to a decade now, and we've been serving institutional clients and providing trading infrastructure for that time. But it's really only in the past couple of years that we've added DeFi connectivity and give our clients access to the on-chain markets. Why did we take so long? Well, candidly, up until a few years ago, we just haven't seen the appetite from our institutional clients to interact with DeFi. We generally tend to follow our clients and where they go. And for the first portion of the existence of Talos, our clients' needs have been really focused on CeFi liquidity. However, that's changed. DeFi has really become a powerful liquidity source that institutions can no longer ignore. And the Talos integration removes the frictions of accessing it while still meeting their operational standards that sophisticated firms expect. Now, with that in mind, Drew, what are you seeing on your side? Can you please set the stage for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Anton. I think 2025 has been, the story of the year has been the institutional interest in DeFi. We're also seeing the same interest, from new counterparties, especially in the wake of the administration change and more regulatory clarity that we've been seeing in the space. But since the last cycle, we've really been seeing a major upgrade in all parts of the stack, the infrastructure that DeFi is built on, and then also just the proliferation of assets and liquidity within the ecosystem. So I think the key message today is that DeFi markets are now too liquid and too strategic to ignore. I think institutions should no longer be asking if they should engage with DeFi, but they should be asking, how they can do it. And through Talos is, really one of the top choices for that.
And the title of our webinar is Why, and I guess why is now the moment for institutions to start engaging with DeFi operationally and not just hypothetically?
Yeah, happy to delve into that. I think if we bring up the first slide that I wanted to touch on, I think it's been a story of growth and maturity for the DeFi space. So thinking about the last cycle, from about 2020 when we had the first DeFi primitives come online, through the FTX debacle in 2022. I think what we had seen at that time is the first primitives just, weren't really up to the institutional grade. And since that time, in the last 3 years, we've seen, 3 major reasons why institutions are coming on chain. The first is liquidity growth and the transformation of that liquidity. Not only has liquidity proliferated, we've seen a ton of liquidity come to AMMs, both on the back of retail being able to, LP more easily within the pooled liquidity model. We've also seen a lot more interest from market makers and treasuries now that you have better primitives like Uniswap v3 and v4, which more similarly mimic the order book style liquidity and also have a lot more customizability built into it. But now we also have things like order flow auctions. We have intent-based systems like Uniswap X that more closely also mimic traditional RFQ systems. Where if you're an institution and you have a certain trade size and asset pair, you can go basically solicit a quote from 40 different professional market makers and on-chain routers that can bid to fill your order flow at a better price than what you're seeing on chain, if that does work for the trade that you're queuing up. Also, the infrastructure has just become a lot faster and a lot more efficient. Back in 2020 and to 2022, the Ethereum layer 1 was quite congested. We saw high gas costs across the ecosystem and even in some of the other chains that had proliferated at the time. Today, you can go to L2 ecosystems like Base, Unichain, Arbitrum. You have block times that are now 200 milliseconds instead of 12 seconds. And you also have transactions that are now sub-cent versus, paying $50 to $100 for a transaction back in 2021 at the peak of the bull market. We also have the advent of infrastructure like Uniswap v4 that's just even further optimized for gas cost savings across the LP and swapper spectrum. I think the last reason is that now we do have institutions that have recognized that there is this liquidity sitting on chain. They've looked at the liquidity depth, they've looked at the asset selection. There are a lot of assets that they can access via tier 1 and tier 2 exchanges that they're accustomed to transacting on. And now they have direct access via the top EMSs in the space like Talos. As those pieces of infrastructure have identified DeFi as a place for good liquidity. And now we also have better regulatory clarity. In the last 6 months, we have seen the Genius bill. We're starting to get a market clarity bill, and now we just have better best practices around custody and compliance than we did in the last cycle. So that's really led to the sustained interest in DeFi from the institutional space.
Makes sense. I mean, you touched on this briefly, but I would say, look, if you need to buy, blue chip assets like Bitcoin or Ethereum, I mean, you got options, right? CeFi, OTC desks, you name it. Even though I would still argue that for some of them, it does make sense to go to DeFi, and I think we'll talk about that a little later. But Drew, when most institutions think about DeFi today, what do you see as like the biggest unlock, particularly when it comes to the breadth of assets that are available?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think if we flip to the next slide, I think this is a good evaluation of the different execution venues. So I think for the last couple of years, institutions have mostly been focused on centralized exchanges and OTC desks, which are very deep places for liquidity and quick trade execution. But I think the major unlocks have just been within especially the Ethereum ecosystem. The ability to access new projects and new assets that actually haven't been going the centralized listing route. So being able to access tokens like Euler and Hedgic and others that really don't have any tier 1 exchange liquidity. And then also I think looking at the liquidity breadth across different blue chip and medium tail assets. I think if you go to the next slide. Really what we've gotten into now is that the amount of liquidity that's come on chain, both from professional market makers and the retail side of the equation, has really built up strong liquidity across all these assets, especially in the stablecoin side of the world. And then as I mentioned before, we also have these RFQ systems where your favorite market makers and on-chain routers can now more efficiently route your trades. And now we've brought private inventory into the equation for the first time, since the last cycle. So now, if you have a trade that is a big block trade, you can actually have it filled with private inventory and also a combination of private inventory and on-chain liquidity. But we've seen liquidity really proliferate across those medium tail assets like Aave and Pendle, where some of the best liquidity now rests on chain in liquidity pools. That's built up over the course of the last 3 years. And then for those assets that are too hard to get on centralized exchanges, DeFi is really the only venue for access to these assets. And so you can see across assets like Hedgic and Euler that I mentioned before, you see liquidity depth of anywhere from 50 to 200K on DeFi versus not having a listing on a centralized exchange or just not having good liquidity on those venues.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I think just to build on that, from our side, what we're seeing from our clients is really 2 main use cases. So on the buy side, it's typically an alpha play, right? So if a buy-side institution has conviction in a new protocol or a new asset, DeFi really gives them the ability to act on that view very early in the cycle, which is really not possible if that asset is not yet listed on CeFi venues. I would say on the sell side, the motivation is a little different. And it's really driven by the customers of our clients, right? So their customers are demanding access to this liquidity. And I think if you want to stand out as a sell-side institution in a very crowded space, if you want to offer something differentiated, right, DeFi is often the only place where you can really source that inventory to provide to your customers. So I think whether it's about capturing alpha or serving customer demands, right? Access to long tail assets is not really niche anymore. We're really seeing it as part of the core strategy for a lot of our clients.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're hearing from our side of the house as well. Yeah, I think moving on. So I think we should talk about usability for a moment. So from where you sit, Anton, on the product side, if an institution is already trading through Talos, what does it take to actually access this DeFi liquidity?
Yeah. Our goal, and again, we were very thoughtful in building this out. Our goal from the start was to make DeFi and particularly Uniswap feel like just like any other liquidity venue that our clients connected through Talos. We knew it had to be seamless and not just something that required clients to adjust and rethink their workflows. So that's exactly what we've built. And if I may share my slide here, those of you who are familiar with the Talos platform, and those who are not, right? What you're seeing here is essentially Uniswap liquidity exposed in our market cards. It feels and acts like any other venue that's connected to Talos. So what I have here is really 3 market data cards, one feeding the price from Uniswap, one from a CeFi venue in Kraken, and the cherry on top is really combining that liquidity in an aggregate market data card, giving you essentially the best of both worlds. Now, what imagine we could do here, obviously you can, pin the 2 liquidity sources against each other, or you can combine them and aggregate them into one view and then execute a trade through Talos like you normally would, right? With fills, confirmations, everything else flowing exactly the same way. And that's exactly what we built. Now, compliment goes out to Drew and the Uniswap Labs team. The reason we were able to build this is thanks to the institutional grade APIs that Uniswap Lab has developed. We were actually one of the first partners to integrate with those APIs. And today we've embedded access to Uniswap Classic, V2, V3, V4 directly into the Talos platform. We're also in the final stages of integrating with Uniswap X natively within the same interface. And again, what that will mean for our clients is just more liquidity, right? Delivered through the same exact infrastructure that they already know and trust. And to sort of keep expanding this idea, at Talos, we're just obsessed with the idea of best execution, right? That's been our North Star from day one. I really firmly believe that our smart order router is the best in the industry when it comes to navigating CeFi, how to split orders, how to route them across venues, the algo suite that we built that can be also applied on top of DeFi liquidity, how to optimize for best prices, best fill quantity. So Drew, I'm very curious, how does Uniswap approach the same challenge in the DeFi world?
Yeah, I think it's another good question. And I think we approach it very similarly. So thinking about the trading API, we kind of equate it a little bit to Talos. So we're able to, through Uniswap Classic, which is a smart order router, and through Uniswap X, we're really able to source liquidity from all over, especially for the long tail assets. So at a high level, I mean, if you think about it, we're able to, take a look at liquidity across various pools in Uniswap Classic, so V2, V3, and V4 pools, and are able to fill, trades that are properly routed across those pools. And we're also able to queue that Uniswap X network of professional market makers and entities that don't have balance sheet, but are also in the business of, creating optimal trade execution through only on-chain pools. And we're able to, effectively pull both of those networks and deliver the best price to our users, which means we're not really just matching on a single venue. I think a lot of people sometimes think of, Uniswap as only, filling your trade through one pool, which is just not the case. So we're effectively matching, across venues with competing sources who, in the end, are all just competing to give our clients the best execution. This is especially prevalent in the longest tail of assets where liquidity is quite fragmented. That's where this kind of routing, really matters. And the results of the institutional grade API are a 99% fill rate and substantial uptime, and consistently stronger, pricing under volatile conditions.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I actually do think of Uniswap Labs as the Talos in the DeFi workspace. I mean, you guys are bringing institutional quality execution logic to really what is a fundamentally different market structure. But the idea is the same, right? Going out and getting the best possible price for what you need. And again, I think that's what's really exciting from our client's perspective is because through Talos, again, with our partnership, you're not just getting the execution across centralized venues, you're now adding a DeFi native venue that's built to do the same exact thing, but just on-chain. So again, what our integration allows our clients to do is to combine the two, to get the best execution across CeFi and DeFi through the same infrastructures, same workflows, and same tooling. So it's no longer about picking sides, CeFi versus DeFi. It's really about getting the best execution, full stop.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And we've been talking a lot about execution speed, liquidity, and fill quality. But there's actually a whole second half to every trade, right? Especially for the institutional landscape, and that's with settlement and reconciliation. So how do you see the DeFi game or DeFi changing the game there, rather?
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting for me personally. In addition to being the product manager at Talos on DeFi, I also very focused on post-trade workflows. So I firsthand see the challenges that our clients have when it comes to managing those flows, especially when it comes to settling with OTCs or pre-funding, CeFi venues. And I think that's what actually makes DeFi so exciting for me. It's just not as a liquidity source, but as an operational unlock. And I actually think that's something that's not that institutions are not fully aware of yet, and it's really not being talked about enough. So I think earlier we talked about blue chip, liquidity, getting, let's say, ETH or USDC from DeFi versus going out to CeFi. And I think the natural question is why bother, right? Why go to DeFi to get something that you can already easily get from a CeFi venue or an OTC desk? And I think to me, the answer is very simple. It's really operationally easier and settlement in particular. So if we talk about just a simple use case, let's say you have some ETH that you're holding in your treasury and you need USDC, right? So this could be for treasury or operational purposes. What are your options? So what most clients would do today is they would essentially send that ETH to a CeFi venue, right? Pay the gas fee on the way in. They would pay the trading fee, and then they're subject to withdrawal rules and policies of that CeFi venue. You can also go and trade on the OTC, but again, then you're subject to transfers and the settlement cycles, which are sometimes hours or days, even in some instances. And just in terms of number of operational steps that each of those takes, I mean, we're talking 6 to 9 different steps for CeFi, 8 to 12 sometimes for OTC. Each of those represents a distinct event that has to be tracked, audited, and controlled. Or you could just go to DeFi and you swap ETH for USDC, and it's in your wallet within seconds. It's instantaneous settlement in one atomic transaction. Now, to me, that's not just speed improvement, obviously. It's a huge simplification of post-trade processes. And really, in many cases, it's safer and far more capital efficient. You're really getting rid of some of the counterparty risk that you may experience. And again, I do think that's a huge, huge unlock with DeFi on the operational side that clients are not talking about yet, I should say. So yeah, just coming up here. So just to zoom out for a second, again, we've been talking about how institutional access to DeFi is changed. I was going to say changing, but I think it already has changed. It used to feel like something very experimental, something off to the side, but I feel like now it's showing up in workflows that are very real, right? We talked about alpha seeking strategies from our buy-side clients, long tail exposures, obviously, and then our sell-side clients, and even treasury operations that we just covered. And I think our job at Talos has been to make that access seamless, to take a decentralized venue like Uniswap and make it feel like just like another venue on the blotter side by side with your regular CeFi and OTC liquidity. And we're really not doing it just through integrations, but really by making sure we're standardizing the workflows. So all the post-trade, all the compliance, operational workflows stay the same. And the teams don't have to retrain or rewire how they work. So I'd say that's my summary. Drew, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that's right on, especially on the operational side. I feel like that's overlooked quite a bit. But no, everything that you've echoed that we're seeing on the Uniswap side, effectively seeing the same evolution. Institutions, they aren't just curious anymore. They're active in DeFi, and they're asking the serious questions about execution quality, liquidity depth, integration paths, and then also operational readiness. I think that's why we built the infrastructure the way we have with the trading API. Being able to aggregate, multiple sources of liquidity, both on chain and from private inventory, from market makers. Being able to surface better pricing, provide more reliable fills, especially in the fragmented markets, for the long tail assets that are in vogue right now. And partnerships with leading partners like Talos are really key for us. If we want institutions to engage with DeFi, we really need to meet them where they are. And we also need to solve not just for trade execution, but also for the operational side on settlement and reconciliation. And Talos is really a leader in that space. So we're really excited that we finally gotten to this point after a long first cycle of DeFi.
Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, before we close, let's maybe address some questions. I do see two that came through here. So the first one is, most institutional desks are used to fast, clean, low latency execution on CeFi. What are the biggest friction points today in using DEXs, and what needs to change before serious volume can migrate? Drew, you're probably a better place to take this one.
Yeah, happy to take this one. And this may be a misconception from the the institutional crowd that there's really only 12-second block times or longer in the DeFi ecosystem these days. The proliferation of the L2 environment, which has seen billions of dollars of assets flock into liquidity pools onto those networks, and have really seriously upgraded the architecture of these chains, where you're able to have 200 millisecond block times, but your average L2 has an average block time of 1 second. So that's basically over a 10x improvement. So we've really seen pretty low latency execution that's more comparable to the SEX environment. And yeah, I think also just the big unlock from last cycle was, as we mentioned a number of different times, just the amount of liquidity in the system. I think we're pretty fragmented, and the infrastructure wasn't yet built for the professional market maker segment, and also wasn't built for treasuries and other retail liquidity providers to be active in the ecosystem. So the growth of that liquidity has really just brought the ability to have better trade execution. So just a leveling up in both latency and execution quality.
Thanks, Drew. Seeing one more question. What is the best way to ensure secondary liquidity at all times? Yeah, I could probably take that one. So as I showed sort of previously, aggregating multiple sources of liquidity where DeFi is one part of the equation is possible via Talos. So what we've seen clients do is they create essentially an aggregated pool of a market card that they're interacting with, right? So if you just think of, and you should be thinking of DeFi as just yet another liquidity source. And in that sense, there's no sort of failure if that liquidity source for whatever reason is not available. Sort of our algos will just move on to the second available. And obviously at the time of order entry, we will validate which has the best price, and then we will route accordingly. So again, I keep sort of harping on this, but this is really, to me, is the biggest unlock. I think we need to move away from thinking of DeFi as like a separate thing that's here. It's really part of the same liquidity pool that you should be considering. So I'm not showing any more questions, but if there are, please reach out to either one of our teams. We're really happy to take those after the webinar. So in closing remarks, again, we've covered a lot today in terms of infrastructure, access to execution, operations. And if there's one thing I want to leave people with is that this DeFi is no longer a separate ecosystem, right? Through Talos, it now sits side by side with every other venue that you already use. It's the same workflow, same interface, same operational standards, just with more liquidity and opportunity.
I think that's, again, well said. We thinking the same thing, you know, on our side at Uniswap Labs. Centralized venues, you know, still offer, you know, deep liquidity and are quite competitive, but you know, we've really seen the DeFi ecosystem level up quite a bit, and so offering comparable liquidity to centralized venues on blue chip and medium tail assets, and then also, you know, for the longest tail of assets, you know, offering access to, you know, assets that don't really exist in those ecosystems. I think the question is, you know, whether institutions will engage with DeFi. It's really whether they can afford not to. The tooling's ready, the performance is here, and with partners like Talos on the EMS side, I'd really echo that that institutions really don't have to build their own new stack. They can simply expand, you know, what they have. So, you know, supplementing centralized liquidity with decentralized liquidity from Uniswap Labs trading API. So if you're interested in activating DeFi trading through Talos, or you just want to learn more from either of our teams, feel free to please reach out. Be happy to walk you through what's possible and how quickly you can get started. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Anton.
Thank you, Drew. Well said as well. Thank you for joining, and thanks everybody else for joining.